The night is dark and full of fear. Ghoul Realm invites you to a realm where the line between humans and monsters is blurred. Get ready to face your fears as we tell the harrowing story of Kim Tae-young, who finds himself trapped in the clutches of an unforgiving forest and its terrifying inhabitants. This is EP1 of Ghoul Realm. Thank you for your subscription and likes. I hope you can leave your thoughts in the comments section. 1. Creatures. The cool breeze was hitting his hair, causing those soft silver bangs to dance in the rhythm. He was running late, his bag loosely hanging over his shoulder as he rushed to the station, bumping into a few people and apologizing quickly. A small smile almost formed on his lips when he saw the station number on his ticket, and the same number on the screen, but it couldn't last for long as he saw the train moving away from the station. "Hey! No! Stop!" He yelled over the train that gladly showed its back to him, causing him to finally stop, huffing and panting as he leaned over, hands over his knees while his bag slipped over and stopped at his elbow, giving him a little jerk because of the heaviness. "Great! Just great!" He yelled in frustration, getting attention from the passerby who frowned upon his outburst, but he wasn't going to apologize this time because he didn't see that. Hitting his own head a few times while slipping the bag over both of his shoulders, he rushed back to the outside of the station with the hope to get a cab. "Sir, is it available?" He panted while pointing towards the cab. The driver nodded his head with a glint of happiness for having a new customer. "Where to?" the driver asked while getting himself ready. "Chunshin." Driver stopped his movements and gave the boy a scowl. "Chunshin? Through a cab?" The driver cocked a brow. Actually, I missed my train dash. Sorry boy, but I don't want to destroy my car." With that, he left the boy standing there with a dejected expression. He fished out his ringing phone to see his friend calling him. "Hyung," he whined as he received the call. "Don't hyung me, Kim Tae-young. How could you disappear like that? I came to your apartment to find it dark, and then went to your company to know that you're going out of the station. Like really?" Silver-headed boy, Kim Tae-young, a 25-year-old reporter, is very much passionate about his work and loves his job. Well, not at such times when he gets scolded by his hyung. Young. Please don't be angry now. I'm sorry, please. I'm already very tense because I missed my train. I'm not getting any cab, but I also need to reach there by morning to have the report done," Tae-young said, rubbing his temple while eyes scanning the area in the hope to find another cab because no more trains were going after the missed one because of some problems. "What? Come back, Tae. No cab will take you there. You're in Seoul for sake. Chunshin is very far away. Jin Hyung, you're not helping at all. I really need to go there." Tae-young whined again to hear Jin huffing in anger. "But why you? Can't they send someone else? Last time you almost got lost in the new place." "Don't remind me of that." Okay. But you should at least talk to your chief about that." Tae-young pouted and stomped his foot, not noticing a person coming towards him with a smile. "Excuse me, sir." Tae-young turned to him with a small smile. "Yes. I just saw you talking with a cab driver. Do you need to go somewhere?" Tae-young nodded his head. "Actually, I need to go to the Chunshin." A glint of sadness was there because he thought this driver will also deny, but to his surprise, the other clapped his hands. "Then let's go, sir. I'm also going there for some personal reasons. I thought to ask you before going." Tae-young blinked before letting out a chuckle. "OMG. Hyung, I just found a cab." "Really?" Jin, actually Kim Suk-jin, his old friend and more like a brother, was beyond surprised on hearing that. Tae-young chuckled and followed the driver to his car, and settled in the back seat as the driver took the driving seat. "Yep, really. Now don't worry and tell Chim too about my tour because maybe I won't be able to call you both there," he said while nodding to the driver who finally started the engine. "Fine. But please be careful, Tae. Make sure to eat well and have some rest. But don't fall asleep in the cab. I don't trust people easily." Tae-young scoffed at the comment but muttered a yes. "Now be careful. Bye." "Bye, Hyung." He put his phone back in his pocket and leaned backward on the seat to feel better and more comfortable. He continued checking his phone for the location and find out that the driver was going on the right way, well according to the map. The long day had made him very tired, and the thought of being early at the event made him more tired. Tired to the extent that he didn't realize it when he dozed off, clinging to his bag. A piece of soft music made him stir in his sleep, and when he opened his eyes, he was met with dark, thick vegetation and no lights. A frown formed on his flawless features as he made himself sit straight. "Excuse me, sir. Where are we?" "This isn't a highway." The driver gave him a glance through the back view mirror and smiled. "This is a shortcut for Chunshin. Don't worry, I'm very much aware of it. I spent half of the month over these roads." The man chuckled and Taeyong nodded his head, slightly smiling. Silently he grabbed his phone to see the location, but to his dismay, his network wasn't working, showing any signals in the area. "Wow. Sleep more, Taeyong." He muttered to himself with a scowl and again glanced over the window to see the thick trees, dark silhouettes, and sort of static environment. "That's weird." He mumbled to himself as he felt the eerie silence, no sound at all as the driver turned off the music as well. His gaze then fell over the navigation system of the car, which was also off. "Don't worry, sir, as I said before. I'm well aware of this way," the driver said when he noticed the tension on Taeyong's face. Silverhead just nodded again, feeling a bit uneasy now. He opened his cell phone to distract himself from the awkward situation. It felt like a few minutes passed when the car stopped abruptly with a screech and a few bumps. What dash? Oh. Maybe the engine heats up. Let me check," the driver said and got out to check the engine. Taeyong saw him checking, so he also clutched his bag and stepped out when the driver called for him. He wore his bag over his chest to stop the chills from the cold wind of the night. "Yes. Do you have water?" Taeyong shook his head and saw the driver thinking for a moment. Let me check in the car. Maybe I've some leftovers. I clearly forget to refill it." He muttered as he grabbed a water bottle that came out completely empty. Taeyong waited for some words like, "Oh yeah, I've another one." "Oh yeah." Taeyong's eyes lit up when the other started. "There is a small lake nearby. We can fetch some water from there. But I need to open it up to cool it down." The driver muttered, and Taeyong, being the social butterfly with a kind heart, quickly volunteered to do that. Of course, why would the driver do something when he had his bag with him? Right? Getting the bottle, he walked to the side driver pointed to. He felt his body shudder on the gust of the cold wind, but he shrugged it off. The rustling he heard from the bushes, he felt that was because of the wind. He continued walking, his bag still clinging over his chest, and took out his phone to light up the path. But he halted when he heard the roaring of the engine. Whipping his head back to see the driver of the cab turning the car in haste and then driving away the car. What dash? Taeyong left the bottle and ran to the car. "Hey! Stop! Where are you going?" "Hey!" But the driver didn't stop and drove away at full speed. Taeyong was panting after chasing the car for a while, but stopped when he realized it was useless. What just happened? Another gush of wind made him shiver. I should have listened to Jin Hyung. His lips wobbled at the realization that he was standing on a road, all alone, surrounded by a forest. Before he could think or do anything, he felt distant rustling followed by a little noise, like something was dragged against the road. He felt getting goosebumps, feeling a sense of fear seeping into his body naturally. Slowly, he turned his head to see a figure moving towards him at a very, very slow speed. He let out a sigh of relief thinking about the other human and stepped towards him as well. "Hello. Can you hear me?" He called out the other, but in response, he got no words but some grunts. His face was not visible to Taeyong because of the distance and darkness, but when the other was rather close, a smell invaded his senses, causing him to cover his nose in disgust. "What's this horrible smell?" His face scrunched in disgust, and when he was about to flash his light on the face of the other, the same grunts and rustling happened behind him. His hand flew up in an instant to look at the source, only to stumble back in horror. There wasn't any human, not even a nocturnal animal, but a horrible creature. Torn flesh over his face and other body parts, little remnants of decaying clothes, bulging red and black eyes, dislocated and big teeth, neck cracked over one side, and arms? Arms were longer and claws-like, reaching their knees. Oh my god! Taeyong's breath stuck in his throat on the view as the creature continued stepping towards him, causing him to step backward, forgetting the presence behind him. That wasn't it. Soon another one came out of the thick trees, another one, and then more. And in no time, Taeyong was surrounded by them. His legs were frozen and he was practically dragging himself backward from them until his back hit something. Grunts with horrible smell made him shiver more when the distance felt utterly short. His heart was hammering against his chest in utter fear. Others were already near him by that time and he was left with no chance to run. His shaking body and numb mind weren't working, making him cower under the terrifying gaze of the unknown creatures. Only single thought was roaming in his fading senses. I'm gonna die. To dream. The horrible smell was invading his system too much that he couldn't feel how something sneaked around his neck, until he felt the rough touch over his skin. But it was too late to recognize, because that claw-like hand of the creature was wrapped around his throat, pressing the windpipe brutally, cutting his oxygen supply completely. Taeyong felt his body slightly fighting to free himself, but all of his efforts were useless as the other creatures in front of him started leaning over him, suffocating him mentally as well. He couldn't even complete his words, throat stinging and nerves pulsing loudly, vision getting blurry and hazy. His hands fell on the sides, his phone slipped and fell on the road and his head was pressed against the creature's body, but he couldn't do anything to detach himself from the thing. No. With that, he lost the last speck of his senses and went limp in the hand of the horrible creature. With a loud gasp, Taeyong opened his eyes and jolted up in his chair. His mind was reeling, trying to understand what just happened. But in the next second, the door of his office cabin was opened by a furious Jin. "Hyung! Don't hyung me, Kim Taeyong." The words and tone sounded very familiar, just like he heard in his dream. "I'm here?" He muttered to himself, to which Jin rolled his eyes and walked to his chair. "Can't they send someone else? Last time you almost got lost in the new place." Taeyong's ears perked up at the words as well. He got up in an instant and stood right in front of his Hyung with wide eyes. What? Jin raised his brow and crossed his arms over his chest, the usual gesture he shows whenever he is angry with the younger. "You should at least talk to your chief about that." Taeyong licked his lips now. "Hyung, what is this all about? Where am I going?" "I Chunshin." Taeyong's words stuck in his throat when Jin cut his sentence. All the scenes of the recent dream were roaming in his eyes. Chunshin? He tried to remember the recent things that happened to him, and then the cabin started getting hazy and Jin's face became like that of the creature he saw in the dream. "Hyung." Jin's voice came out like grunts, and before Taeyong could say anything else, the older attacked him and started choking him mercilessly. "Hyung! It's me." Jin was just grunting and choking him. Taeyong's eyes opened and he was gasping badly, his neck hurting and throbbing, and he was sure there must be some ugly marks over his skin. After a bit of time, when he felt his breathing a bit better than before, his eyes roamed around and he again covered his nose on the disgusting smell lurking around him. His heart dropped when he realized that he was dreaming. Not the one with creatures, but the one with his Hyung. Tears started forming in his eyes at the thought that he was stuck in the forest, the one having unknown creatures. Trying to get up with little noise, he tried to understand his current position. He was standing in the thick forest, he wasn't on the road anymore. Thick flora was around him, but to his surprise, he was still unable to hear any kind of sound from the living beings. The darkness was too much due to the almost hidden sky because of the tall and broader tree canopies. He patted his pants pockets to find his phone, his hoodie pocket, but found nothing. Panic started to increase and he fell on his knees to feel his phone on the ground full of litter. Something touched his hands, and when he grabbed it, it came out as his bag. Good thing he wore that over his chest before. Grabbing it and again slipping it over his shoulders, he again started looking for his phone, trying his best to control his breath because of the unbearable smell. While patting the ground, his hand touched something thick and cold. A sense of shiver ran down his spine on that, and he just left it and wiped his hand over the nearby tree trunk. Even after doing so for a little longer, he couldn't find his phone. He heard some grunts and a few loud groans from a distance, making him more aware of his surroundings. With a racing heart, he started walking to the opposite side of the noises, trying his best to be fast and silent. His mind was still thinking about many things. Why that driver left him like that? He could have taken him in the car. Then what were those things? Those weren't like usual zombies. Also, zombies aren't real, right? But the most important one, how come he was still alive? Did they leave him just like that? He continued running and the smell reduced at some point, making him able to breathe again. But his bad luck was really shining as he tripped over a small log and fell flat on his face. A low hiss of pain left his lips and he was sure that now his cheek must be bruised by sensing the throbbing heat over his cheek apple. He tried to get up and run again, but this time a scream left his mouth, after which he quickly shut his mouth with the other hand. Trying again to move, but his ankle was hurting and his leg was stuck in something. With his shaking hands, he tried to get himself free of whatever was stopping him from moving, but it was all futile. The lack of light made it worse and he couldn't believe that it could be worse. Please, please. He mumbled under his breath, which was uneven in fear. His voice came out very hoarse and it was even painful. His eyes roamed between dark ground and the trees around him, in case someone locates him. His whole body froze when a very loud growl echoed through the whole forest. The voice was enough to make any human quiver under the effect, and that's what happened with the silver-haired. Oh please. Please let me go. I don't want to die like that. Please. Tears were now freely falling from his eyes and his whole demeanor was crashing when the grunts grew closer. His hands started moving more quickly, but the shaky hands weren't doing the job better. When he tried to move his leg, it only shoot up a pain. All of his life-saving lectures were dumped at this point. Never knew that life could be this cruel to him at such a young age. A little cry, a cry of despair could be heard from him as he located the now silhouettes of the creatures walking towards him. At this point, he was practically pulling on the thing that he still couldn't understand what was. The front was getting full of those things, but he stopped breathing when he felt a presence behind him. A surely dead end. 3. Saved by a thing. The presence behind him was definitely getting closer, just like the ones in his front. Taeyong didn't respond to any of it, kind of accepting his fate of dying like nothing in the unknown forest by unknown creatures. He closed his eyes, hands falling on the sides as he stopped struggling to free himself. The pain in his ankle was nothing now. He couldn't even cry in his own pathetic condition. I should have listened to you, Hyung. I'm sorry. He let out a sigh, a shaky one, completely ready to feel the claws over his skin, but to his surprise, a hand. Precisely, a hand wrapped around his mouth, and when he opened his eyes to the touch, he saw a faint silver blade that was cutting the thing that was restricting him from moving. He tried to struggle under the hand that was wrapped around his mouth, causing his words to muffle out. Shua. That's what he heard in the response. In the next moment, his leg was free and the creature was right in front of him, ready to pounce on him with the others as well. The horrible smell again started to choke him. That creature extended his extraordinarily long arm to attack him, but the thing behind him dragged him at the right moment, saving him from the attack. The next moments were totally blurred for Taeyong, as the thing continued dragging him away from the creatures. He was literally being dragged, making him stumble many times because of his position and injured ankle, slowing their speed definitely. A loud yelp left his lips when he was carried over a shoulder like a sack. Whoever was carrying him was running very skillfully through the trees, dodging the branches and fallen logs very efficiently, like a very trained one. Or like the one who knows the way perfectly. Who is he? Kidnapper? What if he is a monster as well? The thought left him thrashing under the hold and he felt the air passing him more quickly. The grunts couldn't be heard anymore. Also, the thickness of the forest was reduced to some extent. With his upside-down gaze, he saw a fence lining some area and he was inside that area already. He wasn't sure if he was saved or stuck in another problem. His bag was still over his shoulder, sort of hanging because of everything that happened before. A little clicking made him turn his head to see, but he couldn't see much till he was inside a house. What are you doing? Who are you? Leave me. Panic finally made him burst out in horror. He continued thrashing in the hold and soon, he fell on something like a mattress. Quickly composing his posture in a sitting position, more like a defending one, he glanced over the thing. But to his surprise, the thing was nothing like those horrible creatures. There stands a very handsome boy, around the age of his late 20s. That boy turned on a small light placed near the mattress. Pitch black hairs, a pointed perfect nose, black orbs with gleaming white skin, an old black jacket with jeans. That's what Taeyong saw. What are you? You those things. Do you eat humans? Taeyong asked with his shaky and low voice. eyes still glued to the raven-haired, hands clutching tightly over the bag. Panic was visible in his brown orbs as his tan skin was glowing under the dim light. His whole body was trembling, showing the amount of fear he was feeling at the moment. The raven-haired in front of him sighed, removed his jacket, and threw it over the chair, which Taeyong didn't notice before. "I'm not a monster, boy," he finally said, and Taeyong heard his voice, soft yet stern. In fact, the Revent walked up to him, now having a water-filled bottle in his hand that he grabbed from the ground near the chair. "I saved you from those monsters," he breathed out after leaning over the silver-haired. Taeyong blinked his eyes to understand the situation. Well, it was true that the other male saved him, but the whole thing was messing up his sense of thinking. A little scream echoed in the small house when his ankle was twisted out of blue. When his eyes fell over his ankle, it was instead met with the Revent's eyes. "Don't worry, I just fixed it." Taeyong was on lack of words and actions. His whole body was still trembling. When Revent felt that, he got up and sat near the silver-haired, to which Taeyong scooted away in an instant. "Seriously? Why are you scared of me? I'm a human, you're still not believing that?" he asked in disbelief, clicking his tongue in displeasure, moving his fingers through his hair, totally frustrated. "How will you believe?" Taeyong was just sitting silently. Tears were again falling on his face. "Come on, don't cry," the person said, annoyed. Taeyong couldn't decipher the emotion. "Fine, let me introduce myself. My name is Jungkook, John Jungkook. I'm 28 years old, what about you?" The Revent Jungkook asked in a polite tone. Comparing the grunts of the creatures, he could conclude that those things don't speak, and the way the new boy was talking is definitely big proof that he was a normal human like him. A cry of desperation left his lips, and out of instinct, he brought his right hand up to wipe his tears, but halted to gasp loudly, because his hand was stained in crimson blood. His wrist was red with marks of claws. His hand started trembling violently as he sat there with wide eyes and mouth ajar. Soft pants and gasps filled the environment, and Jungkook was alarmed by his condition. "Hey, calm down. You're safe now, okay? Hey, can you hear me?" Taeyong could hear his voice, but his mind wasn't proceeding with anything. His eyes were stuck on his bloody hand and marks. "Hey, pretty boy." He heard other sorts of yelling, but the sight was blurry, and in the next second, his body collapsed on the mattress, bouncing a little with the impact. "Hey, open your eyes. Pretty boy." Jungkook called him and tried to wake him up, but Taeyong was out cold because of the shock. When Jungkook checked his pulse and heartbeat, he let out a sigh of relief and smiled. He concluded that the boy fainted because of exhaustion and shock. He cleaned the boy's marks and wounds carefully and laid him down on the mattress in a better position. After cleaning and making sure that the boy was fine, he took hold of the bag of the boy to find out his identity. Going through his things, he was met with an ID card. "Kim Taeyong, a reporter," he continued and chuckled. "He is younger than me by whole 3 years." Shaking his head, he put that card back in place and went through the little luggage. The bag was filled with a little wallet of toiletries, 2 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, 1 hoodie, a towel, and little cash. "What brought you here, pretty boy?" Jungkook mumbled lowly, glancing between his face and the forest that was lightly visible through the small locked window. For Savior Taeyong felt his surroundings burning. He tried to move away from the feeling, only to feel it more over his back. He felt his throat all dry. His lips were stuck together as he could feel his own hot breaths over there. "Come on, why do you have to be burning like that? It's already midday." Someone groaned beside him, and he tried to open his eyes, but the heaviness didn't allow him. Moving his lips a bit, he let out a little whisper. "H. Young. Oh, are you awake? Can you hear me?" The same voice asked again. "Geez, come on, open your eyes, pretty boy." "Pretty boy? I've heard that before." Taeyong thought and tried again to open his eyes. A little crack between his eyes, and he saw a silhouette leaning over his figure and tapping his cheek gently. "Can you hear me?" Taeyong slowly nodded his head, and slowly his eyes opened. "Ah, finally. I thought you'd die over me." The person in front of him scoffed and leaned back. A little frown was decorated over the flush face of Taeyong as he tried to sit up. When Jungkook noticed his expression, he cocked his brow. "Don't tell me you forgot me." Taeyong licked his dry lips and leaned back over the wall as his eyes scanned the room. The room was neither big nor small. It was looking spacious because of lack of the furniture. There was a little table, one chair, and what looked like a wooden closet in a corner. Another door was located at the corner, which might be of a bathroom. "Where am I?" Taeyong croaked out in his deep hoarse voice, eyes still looking around. Jungkook was silently noticing his movements. He was sure that Other was too shocked by the previous events that he didn't notice his surroundings last night. Shaking his head in disappointment, he grabbed the water bottle and handed that to the silver-haired. "Here, drink some water." Taeyong stared at the bottle for a long movement before grabbing it. "You're still suspicious of me. Great." Jungkook muttered under his breath as he noticed the hesitation of the other. "Well, I'm Jungkook, as I mentioned last night. Last night? For how long I was asleep?" Taeyong blurted out with wide eyes, and then he noticed the light peeking inside the room from the locked window. Jungkook sighed and rubbed his temple before nodding his head. "Yup. Last night. You're out for about 12 hours straight. I get you here around 4 a.m. and since then you're out. You got a high fever and just woke up." Jungkook finished with a nod, satisfied to complete his line in one go, while looking at his expensive wristwatch. 12 hours. Taeyong repeated in a whisper and felt his heartbeat quicken as he recalled the last night. He put the bottle aside and looked at the Revent, who cocked his brow on that, once again. I need to go. Please. Whoever you are. Please let me go," Taeyong said desperately, eyes holding nothing but fear. Jungkook sighed at that and grabbed the bottle again. After opening the lid, he handed that to the other again. "I'm keeping you here, pretty boy. You need a lot to absorb, so if you're ready I can tell you." Taeyong was confused about that, but when the other pressed the rim of the bottle at his lips, he backed away. "Drink some water. Don't worry, it's clean. I got it from the well." Taeyong frowned upon that in disbelief. "Well, okay. Let me show you that it's fine." The person named Jungkook drank the water from the same bottle and moved his other hand in the air. "See, nothing happened. Now drink it, you need to eat as well." With slightly trembling hands, Taeyong took hold of the bottle and drank water from it. His throat felt alive once again as the coldness made him feel better. "So, your name is Taeyong?" Jungkook started after the other was done drinking the whole bottle in one go. Taeyong's eyes widened and unconsciously scooted away from the other. "Ugh, don't be scared again. Sorry, but I sort of checked your bag last night and found your card." The mention of the bag caused him to look around for that. My phone. I need my phone." "That's not here. I guess you lost it," Jungkook said with a frown. He definitely didn't see any phone or other gadgets in the bag, except for the phone charger and headphones. Yeah. A shiver ran down his spine as he remembered how he actually lost his phone. Those creatures made him lose it. Letting out a sigh, Taeyong got up from the bed, feeling quite dizzy, but he ignored that. He grabbed his bag and checked his things, making the other quite confused. "What are you doing?" Jungkook asked with a frown. Taeyong was moving his hands rather quickly, but the trembling was clear in each move. He found his Converse near the bed and he quickly wore that. "I'm going. Thanks for saving me last night and all, but I really need to go back," he hastily said, hung his bag over his shoulder again, and marched to the door of the cabin when a hand grabbed his bruised wrist. "Are you out of your mind? Leave me. I've to go. I'm not staying here any longer." Taeyong spat and again tried to free his wrist, but the other yanked him towards his own body. As a result, he almost hit the other's chest. "And you think I'm here on a vacation?" Taeyong was struggling to get himself free, but the other was quite strong and his fever made his body feel weak. "I said leave me." "No. Do you think it's that much easy? Then why I'm here? In this shabby place without any other being." The tone made Taeyong flinch badly and he felt cowering under the gaze of the other. "Please." He croaked out again. "You don't understand, this isn't safe. Ghouls are still roaming around in the forest and it's going to get dark soon, which means they will be around everywhere with their full senses. If you want to die in their hands, then go. Get out." Jungkook pushed him and as a result, his back hit the door, causing him to groan in pain. The fierce look in the other's eyes vanished and was replaced with a concerned one. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you." Taeyong bit his lips and straightened himself with the help of the door. What are ghouls? Why they're here? Taeyong mumbled in low voice, eyes fixed on the wooden floor of the cabin. He noticed others' old Timberlands coming towards him and he stepped back. Jungkook sighed again and nibbled over his lower lips on seeing the others scared of him again. Look, first of all, don't be scared of me. Okay? I mean no harm to you. Now please sit back because your body needs rest. You're still suffering from a high fever. The other used a soft tone and Taeyong thought for a while. He really means no harm to me. He is helping me, also I can get some information from him. Okay. With his slow steps, Taeyong walked back to the small bed and sat there with his bag still clutched over his chest. Jungkook also walked to the bed and sat at a distance because he was sure that the other wasn't comfortable with him yet. Ghouls are the creatures that feed on the flesh. Like blood and flesh of any being. Taeyong felt the goosebumps on that and shrank more in his seat. They're mostly active at night, but few also roam around in the daytime as well. As far as I get to know them, they can't see well in the daytime. Taeyong remained silent again and Jungkook took it as a chance to continue. He removed his both Timberlands and sat cross-legged over the bed. I was terrified like you when I first saw them. A small smile formed on his lips as he seemed dazed in a memory. That night, I was going to meet my friends when my car suddenly stopped on this cursed road. The smile vanished as he clenched his jaw. I tried my best but couldn't start the engine. And then I did the stupidest thing in my whole life. Taeyong's eyes were now focused on him. I came out of my car. A bit positive, what happened then? Taeyong asked, frowning lightly as he moved back on the bed to lean back on the small headboard. Revent chuckled sadly and got up from the bed, walking to the table near the chair and opening a drawer. He pulled out a medium-sized old basket from there and walked back. Ghouls got me right there. Taeyong bit his lips, his mind reminding him of his own capture. I was so scared. So scared, feeling all alone and trapped among those horrible creatures. He continued, eyes spacing out like reviewing the time again. I remember they tried to bite me once they dragged me to the forest. Taeyong's ears perked up more on that. He could feel goosebumps on his skin. They bit you? He asked, horrified. Even the thought of having someone besides him who was bitten by them made him tenser than he was already. What if he is infected like them? What if he tries to bite me as well? What if no? His train of what if stopped on the single word, but still he felt uncomfortable, silently watching as the Revent walked to the locked window and tiptoed lightly to look around. I was lucky, or my training for martial arts paid me at that time, I don't know. But yeah, I ran away before they could bare their teeth. Why, you ran away? Yeah, I still remember how I was tripping here and there while running away from them, not knowing where I was going. That run got me here where I'm now. Before Taeyong could open his mouth to say something more, the other one turned to him lightly and shook the basket and empty bottles. You must be hungry and it's going to be dark soon. I'll be going to get something to eat and fill it up again. Taeyong quickly got up from the bed with wide eyes, head shaking furiously. No, you're leaving me alone. You were about to leave a moment ago. Well, you must be hungry, pretty boy, and dash. No, I'm not. Just stay here. Taeyong was feeling like he would be devoured in the absence of the other, still traumatized, totally ignoring the first mockery and his trying to leave. Jungkook sighed and stepped back to the bed where the other was panicking. I'm not leaving you. There are some fruit trees in the backyard of this house. It will take a bit of time. Taeyong again shook his head and grabbed the other's hand. What if they hurt you? No. You can't go outside. They're here. Taeyong was on the verge of crying, but Jungkook's eyes were fixed on the hand that was desperately attached to his own. He sighed and put the basket on the ground before patting Taeyong's hand softly. Don't be afraid, pretty boy. I've been surviving here for don't know how long. It's been months and I'm still alive, feeding myself on those fruits, living like this alone. Taeyong parted his lips, but Jungkook put his finger on his own lips, gesturing him to stay quiet. You go and freshen up yourself. The drum is still filled with water. I promise once you'll be back from there, I'd be here as well. Yeah. Taeyong bit his lip harshly as the other removed his hand from his own and again grabbed the basket. But dash. That's the door of the washroom. Feel lucky to have these luxuries at least. Jungkook chuckled and left the cabin and closed the door carefully, leaving a still panicking silver-haired. Taehyung licked his lips and rushed to the door and tried to open it, but found it locked. Another fear settled in his heart upon that discovery, but he quickly shrugged off that feeling, trying to think a bit positively. After a while, his eyes again roamed around the cabin and he noticed the two doors. Walking to the possible washroom, he opened the door to witness what seems like an ancient type of bathroom, well, if you ignore the toilet. It was a small space. One wooden drum was placed in a corner that was filled with water to the brim. A small can-like thing, maybe to bathe with its help. A small wooden shelf on which a few toiletries were placed. He sighed and slowly removed his sweaty clothes as he decided to take a shower. Reminding himself to take his clothes and toiletries, he again came out to look for his bag for the needed things. The water was kinda cold, making him shiver badly, but he somehow finished it and came out after changing into a new pair of clothes. He did feel fresh after brushing and bathing after hours, but at the same time, he still himself smelt like that rotten being because that was trapped inside his mind. He wrapped his used clothes and put them in his bag. Hopefully, he will wash them up after going back to his home. The door of the cabin opened, making him flinch, but he felt relieved when Jungkook entered with the basket and water-filled bottles. "You shouldn't keep your hair wet when you're already suffering from fever," Jungkook commented as soon as he noticed the wet silver hairs. Taehyung nodded lightly and grabbed his towel to dry his hair. He was again spacing out. His hand was moving very slowly over his hair. Jimin used to dry his hair whenever they had sleepovers. "You'll take forever, pretty boy." Jungkook groaned, snatching the towel from his hand. "No, I was just thinking about my friend." He mumbled in a whisper, but Jungkook did hear that clearly. His hand was moving gently over the silver hairs as Taehyung kept looking at the floor, feeling a bit of warmth from the other's gentle gestures. "It will be fine. We will find a way out of here soon together. But for that, you need to keep yourself strong and healthy," Jungkook said once he was done with the hair. "I washed them up already, you can eat." He offered the whole basket to Taehyung, who slightly frowned when he noticed some new fruits in the basket besides some berries and apples. "They are edible and sweet. Don't worry, these aren't poisonous," Jungkook quickly explained as he noticed Taehyung's gaze over the fruits. "Come on, let's eat." Taehyung nodded and grabbed an apple while Jungkook did the same. They were silently munching on the extremely sweet fruits when they heard a loud roar from the forest. Taehyung's hand stopped midway from taking his next bite. His head whipped in the direction of the door, but Jungkook seemed unfazed. Of course, he was living there for months. He must be very much adapted to this environment by now. They're hungry. Every evening they roar like that. They already sort of devoured all the animals. A few lucky ones maybe escaped. But they ate most of them. I'm sure of it. Taehyung felt his hunger totally vanish on hearing that. So that was the reason for that silence? Why you couldn't run away? Taehyung asked, keeping his half-eaten apple in his hand while Jungkook was munching on the berries. "I tried many times, but they're more on the boundaries of the forest than the center. The reason we are safe here." Taehyung nodded his head. Well, it was understandable because he himself found them at the boundary, and he was sure that it was indeed the center of the forest. He felt a little nudge over his hand. "Eat, pretty boy, you need to eat. I don't feel hungry anymore." Jungkook frowned but didn't press more as he silently ate to his full, and kept the leftover fruits on the table. "I want to go back. Please help me. I can't survive here." Taehyung croaked out. His heart was thumping loudly as the roaring increased with the darkness. Jungkook sighed and went to the washroom, not responding to his words, and that made him sad. The silence once again fell on the area as all the roaring stopped suddenly. The cabin was now more darkened than before, and a little light from the window was gone as well. Little voice of splashing was coming from the washroom, but still, Taehyung felt like the silence will leave him deaf. It was like the times when you can hear whistles in your ears in utter silence. He wanted to call the other but didn't do so, thinking that it must be rude to call him like that. But the fear was engulfing his whole body and he could feel his skin making bumps. To ignore the darkness, he put his legs near his chest and hid his face in between his knees. Rocking his body back and forth, he tried to keep breathing steadily, which was getting difficult with every passing second. How much did he regret stepping out of the car? How much he wanted to step back in time and deny taking that cab? How much he wanted to turn everything normal? But how can he do that now? I'll leave this place tomorrow morning. I'll leave this forest and report it all. He mumbled to himself, more like promise to himself, and that hope made him a bit better until the door of the washroom opened. Oh, it's quite dark now, Jungkook said as he slowly walked to the table to grab his light, but unfortunately, the battery was out already. Damn, forgot to put it in the sun today. He groaned, but Taehyung was just hearing his groans. After a little time, Taehyung felt the bed beside him dipped a bit, indicating that the Revent was now sitting or maybe laying beside him. Sleep now. Your body needs rest. Jungkook mumbled, tired, and within a few minutes, his light snores filled the cabin while Taehyung sat there wide awake. He couldn't sleep the whole night as he could hear the grunts and groans and what seems like cheering of them. He was sure that he also heard some screaming, but that was for a very short span. In short, the night itself wasn't lessening than a nightmare. And he kept sitting in the same spot, too much afraid to even move while Jungkook was sleeping soundly. He had just one thought in his mind, a positive one: I'll leave at any cost. 6. The danger zone. The night turned into bright daylight, but unfortunately, not much of the light was visible through the small cabin. Jungkook was still sleeping peacefully and carefree, like he wasn't stuck in a thick forest with a lot of horrible ghouls. Taehyung frowned at his thoughts and tried to get up from the bed, eyes heavy yet devoid of sleep. The poor boy couldn't blink for the whole night. Seems like the ghouls were having a party or something, because they didn't stop for a second and kept growling, roaring, and howling. At many points, he was totally shocked to see the Revent beside him, who was sleeping like he was on vacation. No, he mocked me, saying that he isn't living here willingly. Sighing to himself, he got up from the mattress to only bite his lips when he accidentally put his weight on his healing ankle. Where are you going? The voice made him flinch so badly. When he turned back, he saw the other looking at him with half-opened eyes. His slightly long hair sprawled like sun rays over his forehead. "The bathroom," he replied, to which the other nodded his head and sat up, stretching his body before starting push-ups on the floor. That's why he is so fit even in this situation. Taehyung pouted unconsciously and went to the bathroom. After getting fresh, he came out to find the fruit basket filled once again. More fresh fruits were added. "Have some, you didn't eat much last night," Jungkook said, and left for the bathroom as well. When the other was back, they both ate in silence. Taehyung hummed in delight as the seemingly new fruits were extremely sweet and tasty. Don't take him wrong, he was starving by now and everything was tastier in such a condition. Even after his intense hunger, he ate a little and quickly grabbed his bag when the other was busy with something in the bathroom. Should I leave without him? A thought passed through his mind when he found the other still doing something in the bathroom, back facing him. No, he said, we can go together. It would be better if we go out together. Shaking his head, he sat back on the bed and stared at his company, eyed, caressing the words with sadness. They must be devastated by my disappearance. Hey, pretty boy. The voice made him look up to find the other tying his hair in a small man bun with a small band from his wrist, leaving the front strand free. What's in your mind? He completed tying the bun and Taehyung blinked. The other looked, handsome hot? A snap of fingers made him blink again. I just want to go back. Jungkook nodded his head and sat in front of him. Right now, Taehyung said and got up, ignoring the dull throb in his ankle. To his luck, his temperature was much better, or it would be another problem. Right now? The raven-haired repeated his words before getting up as well. Taehyung looked back at him, expecting some answer, but to his surprise, the other took hold of an old bag and went to the door. Aren't you coming now? Of course, he is desperate as well. Who wants to live in such a place? Taehyung followed him with slow steps but made sure to be around him. The forest was again drowned in that eerie silence. Just a bit of rustling here and there because of the wind, but nothing else. So you're a reporter? In which company? Jungkook asked, noticing the uncomfortable aura of the silver-haired. B2V. Jungkook nodded lightly and kept walking like they were on a walk. Aren't you afraid? It was the limit, and Taehyung found the words coming out of his mouth. Jungkook whipped his neck to face him, cocking his brow. Afraid? Taehyung dumbly nodded. Of course I'm. But not as much as before. Also, this area's kinda secured, they never crossed the certain limit. Taehyung again nodded. Well, that's kinda of good. You tried this before, right? Jungkook sighed. nodding as he cut a long bush with his knife. When did he take that? Taeyong was astonished as the raven-haired kept clearing the way, making it easier for him because the other was skillfully dodging them, just like that night. I tried, or you can say I try every day. I even marked a few places according to my observations. He pointed towards the side where a black cloth was wrapped around a tree trunk at a height. I marked it when I found that they never crossed this area. Well, not since I'm here, I never saw them in this area. They kept walking when Taeyong noticed another cloth. That was red, but the red seemed to turn into dirty orange or brown. That's Dash. Jungkook sighed heavily and took another knife from his bag that was firmly hanging over his shoulders. The danger zone. Danger zone? Jungkook just kept quiet and slightly pushed the other behind himself. Yeah, they roam out of this range. That's the point where I always lost hope. The voice was enough to make Taeyong feel dread the older went through in the past days. Feeling the need to comfort the Revent, he patted his shoulder before squeezing the stiff muscles lightly. You'll be fine, we will be fine, Hyung. Taeyong softly said and again patted the other's shoulder. He could feel the muscles tensing under his touch, so he pulled his hand back quietly. Hyung, Jungkook muttered lowly. Hun. The other lightly chuckled before turning back, his eyes literally sparkling in the daylight. So I'm your Hyung now? Taeyong shrugged his shoulders. You said you're 28 and I'm 25, so you're my Hyung. But if you don't like it, Dash. No, it's fine. Taeyong stopped when the other said and again turned his back to carefully look forward. Let's go. After a while, Jungkook gestured to him and they both walked further. The trees started to become thicker. Most of them were old banyan trees, giving the area more creepy vibes. This tree is very creepy. Taeyong nervously chuckled, trying to make himself a bit brave because he knew it was not easy. He was a reporter, but he was never good with the blood and all. Maybe you can call him hemophobic. Jungkook snickered but said nothing, more focused on any sort of voice around them. Everything seemed fine to the younger, who smiled to himself, feeling very much hoped to have his usual life back, but he groaned when he bumped into the back of the other. Wsh dash. He stopped midway when his eyes fell on what the other halted. The scene was enough to make all of his hopes fade away slowly. He felt his stomach churning on the awful smell and more on the pieces that were scattered on the dead leaves, painting the once yellow leaves into crimson red. These dash. Jungkook quickly made him shut up when he heard some distant groaning. Taking the other's wrist in his rough hand, he dragged him to the nearest banyan tree, hiding behind the wide tree trunk. Taeyong's eyes were wide in fear, hands trembling like those dried leaves that were rustling at the top of the trees, ready to fall. He couldn't tear his eyes from the pieces of the human body. They were badly torn and all, but anyone could tell that once they were part of a human body. But he had to look at the other when Jungkook pressed his body back on the trunk. Both of them were glued to each other and his back on the trunk. He opened his mouth to say something, but Jungkook silently shook his head. Right then, he found himself hiding his face in Jungkook's jacket when the slow, uneven steps took his attention. The slow yet noticeable growling made him lean more over the other. His heart was beating so loudly, almost ramming inside his ribcage when the voice came closer. Jungkook had his knife tightly clutched in his left hand while his right hand was now on Taeyong's shoulder as the latter was badly shaking. The ghoul made a loud growling when he smelled something and crouched on the ground. When Taeyong slightly peeked through the other's chest, his stomach churned again. The horrible creature was munching on the fallen parts, growling here and there. His ears were twitching as he chewed the skin, and that was enough for the silver-haired, who hastily looked up at the Revent. Please dash, he begged. Not knowing for what, but the other seemed to understand and softly patted his head, mouthing in it's gonna be okay. But he wasn't at rest. The rustling again happened when the ghoul was done with the pieces and growled in displeasure. Taeyong badly flinched when the same ghoul punched the tree trunk from the other side. In haste, he stepped away from the trunk, slightly pushing the other as well, but halted when something soft came beneath his foot. Jungkook again tried to make him calm, but he felt all of his surroundings fading away, his body suddenly feeling utterly exhausted as the eyes started drooping. In his daze, when he lazily stepped away from whatever was there, his stomach finally churned with all the knots as he puked right there, right over the half-eaten hand. Jungkook's eyes widened when the ghoul's ears twitched at the voice and he loudly growled, stomping in their direction. Damn! Jungkook cursed that Taeyong heard clearly, but after that, he found his surroundings becoming dark, starting from the corner of his eyes. No, I want to run away. But his words remained in his mind as he fell over something, heart still not at peace as the howling was louder before fading away, completely. 7. Awkward. The whole cabin was silent when a little groan was heard, getting the attention of the another human sitting at a distance. Pretty boy, can you hear me? Taeyong frowned on hearing the voice, and the frown deepened when his cheek was patted by a warm hand. Come on, wake up now. It's been hours. The voice again entered his ears, and with a lot of effort, he opened his eyes only to find his surroundings dimly lit and blurry. Where am I? Jungkook sighed at the question and get hold of a bottle from the floor. In the cabin. Hearing that, Taeyong blinked to clear his vision and found that the other was so right. He was back in the same cabin. Drink some water. Jungkook handed him the bottle once he sat up on the mattress. His head was still heavy and aching, muscles still sore and exhausted, for no apparent reason. Taking some greedy sips from the bottle, he handed back the bottle and leaned back. What happened? We were so close to running away from this hell, then what happened, Hyung? Jungkook exhaled harshly before leaning back as well. The same that's happening for months with me. Taeyong turned his head towards the revent and noticed something. The jacket was off and only a black shirt was on his upper body with a deep V-cut, showing off his collarbone and a pendant. The pendant had very odd marks over it, something like a shining star or maybe like wires. A snap of fingers dragged him away from his observation, and he quickly looked away when Jungkook noticed his gaze and tried to hide his exposed skin. Don't stare, pretty boy. I'm not in my best state now. He chuckled and shook his head, probably thinking about his past, carefree life. Taeyong felt his cheek getting warm at the remark and cleared his throat. I wasn't staring. Yeah, sure. The silver-haired huffed and closed his eyes, lightly massaging his scalp to soothe the dull ache. Does your head hurts? Taeyong nodded at the question, and in the next second, he felt fingers replacing his own and massaging his scalp in a better way. The cabin was again silent for a minute or two, but the silence was broken by a loud gasp from the younger. What? You, oh my god. We were this close to a monster in the forest when I fainted. How, what happened after that? Are you okay? I'm sorry for burdening you again. As the previous encounter with the ghoul hit his brain, he panicked, clearly remembering what happened at that moment, and how dreadful the situation was. So, you do remember? Jungkook cocked his brow at the slow realization that made him embarrassed, but he was still concerned. I'm sorry. I don't know how I fainted like that. The fingers in his hair gently massaged as Jungkook lightly smiled. Don't worry, that's okay. You were scared beyond shock. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about? Seriously? If it wasn't for you, I might have been there, in their rotten stomach. Only the thought made him shiver, but Jungkook was there to comfort him. Nothing like that would happen to you when I'm here with you. I said we will leave this place together, and we will. He looked determined, and that was enough for the younger to believe in him. Thank you. I really want to go back with you. We can stay in touch even after going back to our lives. Jungkook nodded lightly with the same little smile. But Taeyong was still very much stuck to the view he had before fainting. Hyung, how did you get me out of there? He again inquired. I did that before many times as well. The ones in the daytime are kinda easy to get tricked. I used a rock to distract him, but unfortunately, that voice brought more of them. Taeyong felt bad because this was definitely difficult to get through such situations even when you had to take care of a fainted body. I'm sorry. It wasn't your fault, stop apologizing. We should be thankful that nothing bad happened and we somehow survived. Taeyong nodded and looked around to find the rechargeable battery placed on a side of the cabin. What time is it? It's around 7 p.m. You again slept like a winter bear. Jungkook chuckled, but Taeyong felt embarrassed. I'm not like that usually. I know. Your body was exhausted because of the fever and the tense situation. It's good that you had a good rest. He is so kind and caring. Taeyong internally thought when the other slowly got up from the bed and stretched his arms a bit, which made something peek out of his sleeves. You're injured. Jungkook looked down when Taeyong launched over him to inspect the long scratches over his arms, blood oozing from the cuts. It happened because of me, I'm so sorry, Hyung. He felt utterly awful, but two warm hands cupped his face gently, taking him by surprise. If I'm able to save you, I'll do it 100 times. These are nothing. Taeyong was frozen by the words and the gesture, but Jungkook was looking so serious about his words. Get up, you should eat. After an awkward moment, Jungkook pulled his hands back and looked around. He felt attracted to the doe-eyed younger, sitting on his knees on the bed and looking up at him with teary eyes. Taeyong kept sitting in the same position, and watched the older getting hold of the basket before leaving the cabin. The warmth was still present on his cheeks, but it wasn't due to the previous touch, but because of his own blood that rushed there. What was that? The cabin was again silent except for the little munching sound of the two males who were devouring the fruits. I have a medical kit, well sort of. I keep a few bandages just in case. Taeyong broke the silence and Jungkook just nodded in response. Feeling awkward, the silver-haired left the apple. He was eating and took hold of his bag that was placed on the small table near the window. Jungkook watched him with a blank expression as he struggled to find something from his bag, but returned half-heartedly with a pout. I guess I forgot to place some this time. He huffed and plopped back on the bed. Jungkook again had that blank look and that made the younger more awkward. So, to break that situation, he decided to distract himself by looking around in the dimly lit cabin. Once Jungkook was done eating, he put the basket back on the table and went to the bathroom. Taeyong scooted back to lean back on the metal headboard of the old bed and closed his eyes. The cursed moments of sitting and then leaving the cab were playing in his mind. But suddenly, his mind flashed the gruesome view of the torn pieces of the human body, making him open his eyes. They eat humans. He mumbled, the words leaving a very bitter taste on his tongue. But how I survived? Because I got you at the right time. The voice made him look to his side to find Jungkook already standing near him, rubbing his wet hair with an old towel as he was changed into another pair of shirts and jeans. I had them all in my bag, Jungkook nonchalantly said when Taeyong kept staring at his changed clothes. The raven-haired walked around the bed to turn off the light before falling over the bed, lightly hissing that Taeyong assumed was because of the cuts. Now, he felt guilty because firstly the other was injured and he was the reason, secondly, he couldn't even do something to treat the wounds. Don't you have anything to cover them? Or any medicine? I left the house with clothes in a small bag. Not a whole suitcase with all the luxury packed inside. Taeyong frowned, feeling irritated because the other kind of snapped at him. I was just asking, why are you snapping? The words were already out of his mouth and it was late to do anything when the shuffling beside him occurred and in the next second, the other left the cabin, closing the door behind him rather harshly. What? Taeyong got up as well and opened the door of the cabin but no one was in his sight. Moreover, it was quite dark and was very difficult to even focus on anything. Jungkook. Hesitantly, he stepped out of the cabin and looked around, only to find that usual silence. Hyung. I'm sorry. He apologized, feeling like he did upset the other in some ways while he was being a burden over him. Hyung dash, the loud howl interrupted his words and again. Just like the last night, someone screamed for help and it was a boy or man. His heart started beating so badly when the chaotic noises just doubled over and still, there was no sign of the revent. What made him more afraid was, the other left without anything for his protection. Jungkook Hyung? Please, where are you? He was panicking, looking around to hear any sound from his savior, but all he could hear was the screaming and howling. What to do? What should I do? What if something happened to him? The thought made him shiver and blame himself for opening his mouth, even though his intentions weren't bad, but the other was frustrated as well. Please be safe, Hyung. Please. 8. Comfortable. Taeyong was beyond panic when nothing happened even after calling for the revent for a while. He harshly tugged on his own hair, contemplating what to do or what to not. In the end, he rushed back to the cabin to get the battery to search for the older one. When he stepped out of the cabin again, this time with a light source, another scream of help echoed in the usually silent forest, giving him goosebumps all over his body. Licking his dry lips, he stepped out of the fence lining the small cabin and some extra space around that. Jungkook? His steps were hasty and uneven, too much immersed to find the other to even feel dull aches in his ankle. Hyung, please come back. His voice was low and shaky but was still determined. The loud howling was just increasing, like the ghouls were coming this way, but Taeyong didn't stop. His shaky pupils were busy scanning the dark area with the hope to find a buff figure, but found just dark trunks standing tall. A blood-curdling scream from the unfortunate human made him freeze for a second before the eerie silence was back. Once the silence was thick, he realized about his heavy breathing and loud heartbeats. Hyung? This time his voice came back to him more clearly, making him feel more terrified. Dried leaves crunched under his shoes when he took another slow step, only to halt when he heard the more crunching sound. His heartbeat quickened more when the noise just increased, coming his way. Unconsciously, his feet started stepping backward when the sound came closer. His voice stuck in his throat as a loud growling echoed at a distance from him. This all take him to rush back to the cabin, running and panting as he tried to reach the safety of the wooden walls as soon as possible, stumbling many times over the fallen twigs and logs. When he thought that the ghouls were chasing him, he was so right, as a group of 4 or 5 of them were on his tail, growling, grunting, and howling as they saw him rushing away from them. The light was kind of making him more noticeable, so he turned off that once the cabin came into his view. With great difficulty, he closed the fence small gate and stumbled back when the shiny, fire-spitting eyes glared at him from a lot of distance. No. His hopes died as the horrible creature kept staring at him, not going back. Hyung. Jongkuk-hyung. He mumbled to himself and continued stepping back with a heavy heart. Just the thought of losing the older made him crumble with all of his might. He felt his energy and hopes to leave him, but only ghouls didn't leave him and kept growling lowly. The rechargeable torch almost slipped down from his hand when he felt someone's presence behind him. Gulping thickly, he turned back and gasped loudly before jumping over the other in pure worry. Hyung! Oh God, where were you? His hands trembled badly as he jumped on the other, who luckily caught him right in time. First of all, let's go inside. Jungkook's voice was low, thick, and kind of annoyed that leaving the silver-haired with no other choice but to go inside, still in his arms. Jungkook locked the door and let the younger hug him more properly, nose nuzzling in his neck as he breathed out a list of apologies. I thought you left me. I was so scared. I'm so sorry, Hyung. I didn't mean to offend you or to annoy you. The muffled voice kept on speaking and Jungkook couldn't help but lightly smile, hugging the other's lean figure gently. Don't apologize. It should be me to say sorry for leaving like that. Taeyong pulled back with a confused look, but Jungkook couldn't see his expression clearly because of the dark. So, he simply guided the younger to the bed and made him sit before sitting beside him. With careful movements, he took hold of the younger's cold hands and softly traced the skin. I've anger issues. Jungkook started with a low voice that caught Taeyong's attention, but the latter remained silent to hear more from him. That's why I lost my control for a second and snapped out. I'm sorry for leaving, but I needed to calm myself. He soothingly rubbed the cold skin of the younger and squeezed the hands gently. It's okay. It was my fault as well. You're as much as distressed as me. No one would like to stay in such a cursed place. Taeyong mumbled out, relief washing over him as the other explained himself. I called you many times but you didn't come. Please never do that again. Jungkook sighed and scooted closer to the other and now grabbed his shoulders instead of his hands. I was just behind the cabin and couldn't hear your voice until I heard their growling coming closer. Taeyong slightly shivered as the shiny, scary eyes of the ghouls flipped in front of his eyes. Don't leave the cabin like that again. I told you before, this isn't safe, especially at night. The silver-haired nodded his head with a soft okay. His mind still very much disturbed by the previous events, and the event got that magically. Smiling to himself, Jungkook scooted more closer to the younger and softly pushed him down on the old mattress. The tense body under his palms made him feel guilty. Relax and try to get some sleep, he softly said, and Taeyong finally gave up. Laying down as per the guide of the other's hands, he made himself comfortable as the soft parts were delivered to his hair, and felt the other laying beside him. Your arm, it must hurt. Jungkook chuckled when the younger mumbled out as he nuzzled his head onto the pillow. No, it's not that bad. You just sleep for a while. Taeyong nodded again, very much caring now to even say any word in front of the other. Even when he wasn't sleepy, He silently lay there and kind of enjoyed the soft pats over his head until he heard the soft snores of the older when the hand halted, staying over his head. Time passed on, but Taeyong couldn't sleep after his long nap. It was very uncomfortable to stay there in the dark when the sleep was far away from his eyes, but at the same time it was kind of comfortable to be close to the older. The soft snores, warm hand over his hair, small distance. Everything was settling a sort of warmth inside his mind and heart. Before that, he was surely taken aback by the other snapping, but after listening to his reasons, he felt bad. When he recalled what Jungkook said, his heart felt warm as the older came back to him when he felt the danger lurking around. Even in his anger, he was very careful about his safety and was eager to protect him. A small smile formed on his lips when the hand over his head softly pulled his head forward, but he blushed in the dark as his head ended up near older's neck. He heard a soft hum of satisfaction from the other and couldn't bring himself to push the other. So in the end, he let himself breathe in the skin of the other and closed his eyes, almost missing as an arm hugged his waist gently. That was the quickest of him to be closer to someone in such a short time. Maybe it was because there was no one else to lean on, or there was another reason.